It's back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's back. It's okay.
Imagine we just started like this. It's weird as hell. But yeah, do we just do the whole intro again? Yeah. Welcome back, guys.
Yeah, we
To
should do the whole intro again.
okay. So welcome back, guys. To
Another
shit.
day in Paradox.
Exactly. See, we got it better this time. We got it better this time. Now let's scrap all the ones that came before. This is the official one. Yeah. Welcome back, guys, to another week analysis of deeper themes and thoughts or general conversation of
The
certain
Unravelling
anime.
series.
The Unraveling series. It has officially gotten a name. What's our week? What's this week's anime? Tell him, Nugus.
Akira
Let's
from
go.
1988.
Exactly, the legendary status. I've heard so much about it. Not story wise, but it was always put into this like category of okay, like Akira kind of like started this whole anime movement in the West. It's the most famous one. And I've heard it in connotations with like the theme of cyberpunk, and connections to like I don't know if you've heard of the movie what was it? Uh Night no what was it? There was like this one movie in the 80s that was played by the guy that played Han Solo whatever. That kind of had like an cyberpunk theme as well. Any other
You
day would
mean
have what was it? There was like a new movie made or a continuation of it in 2017. Blade Runner. I swear I was about to say
Blade
Knife Runner.
Runner?
I swear to God I was about to
Shit.
say Knife Runner before and I stopped myself before looking ridiculous. So yeah, and connections to like movies such as Blade Runner and cyberpunk themed movies like I've heard a lot of about Akira. Um and I'm glad I kind of like forced myself to watch it for I guess the podcast. What before you watched the movie, like what were your expectations?
I had pretty high expectations, to be honest.
Okay.
Well, for my standards, I usually don't have that much of that high expectations, but this time they were quite high because I've heard a lot about it, especially, let's say, I mean, I didn't buy the Cyberpunk game,
Okay.
but let's say it was pretty hyped,
Yes.
and that kind of brought all the hype back
To like the
for
whole
Akira
theme.
because a lot of people, obviously, I've heard it from other people that it was inspired by Akira.
Yes.
It was kind of one of those first, let's say, cyberpunk, this dystopia
Exactly.
themed movies.
Yes.
And yes, those were my expectations.
So
And I
okay,
would
so
say
my bad. Go on.
I would say at first, when I started watching it, I didn't get what was going on
In the movie?
in the movie.
Okay. That's interesting.
But yeah, what about you?
I in all honesty, I think I okay, so starting from the beginning, right? Like I also kind of did have high expectations of it. Um because like you said, it's like this like in everyone, not everybody's maybe like but not serious, but as in like the OG animes, everybody kind of put Akira up there, right? Like most people that you see on the internet, if you type in like top 10, top whatever animes, like Akira was always part of it. You kind of saw like glimpse of it, like showing the city, like the cybernetic, like dystopian future theme in the city, whatever. And through that, like over the years, you kind of build this, like, I mean, for me at least, like I built this one expectation that I was like, damn, it has to be something like ginormous, whatever. But I wouldn't say like after watching it I was disappointed. Like I really wouldn't say that. The animation was flawless. It stands better than most animes today. But the story was like something that just definitely like flew over my head. Like I didn't understand it. Like I don't. And I read a bit about it later on. We'll obviously come to that later. But yeah, I complete like the story just missed me like by a mile, but the animation and everything else was really entertaining. Like yeah, that's really what my expectation was. But overall, like let's start with like should we start with like reading the whole synopsis, or do you still have something to add to it?
I still have maybe a few, let's say, informations about the anime
Let's go.
itself and the animation. I mean, it's made out of 160,000 different animations and frames, which for that time was like a major project.
It really does impress. Yeah,
it's a lot of work because there was no CGI, which means they were all drawn by hand, all the scenes, which is pretty impressive. I mean,
they had some
frames.
True, they had some adjustments. I read they had some adjustments like for. Do you remember like the motorcycle rides and stuff like that, especially at the beginning? Like those motorcycles and everything had like lights. Exactly. Like I saw this one video like analyzing how they did it and the techniques they used. It's pretty impressive even for their time. And yeah, my bad. Go on.
Exactly. It has twice as many frames and is twice as fluent as other anime that came out in that decade.
In that time.
For example, Spirited Away. And well, that's one fact, which is pretty impressive as well.
No, it's like
it had a $9 million budget, which is about
that was a lot.
1.2 billion yen, I guess.
That was a lot, right?
A huge amount of money for that time.
I mean,
to invest on an animation movie.
True. I mean, for today's standards, it wouldn't really be bad, but it wouldn't be like, right? Like, what was the budget for like? Okay, if we compare it to like bigger movies, whatever.
I mean, even today, it's a pretty high budget, I would say, because you have to draw everything was drawn. Nowadays you have the CGI, the computer drawing.
Yeah, but look. For instance, like like a bigger movie, right? Like something that we watched, not together, but something that we watched separately and admired. Kimi no Nawa, right? Your Name. It says it had a budget from 10 million to 30 million in between, right? And 9 million.
Yes, but let's say that movie. Well, of course, it's like very modern and it's all drawn by specialists and it has a lot of animation. I won't take that out of it. But the fact that back in the day, for that animation, or at least for the level of animation it had and the standard, it was pretty high price, high budget.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But I mean,
$9 million in 1988 for an animation movie, and people didn't know if it was going to succeed.
Exactly. Like you got to remember, right? Like the whole in today's standards, like anime is something known globally, right? Like everybody from west to east knows about anime. There are merchandises, movies coming out, series coming out left and right. But back in like 1988, like nobody knew about it. Like Akira was the movie that introduced anime to most people in the West, actually. So it was the front line, right? And that's even more impressive. The fact that people said like, okay, yeah, we should invest $9 million, or it was dollars, right?
$9 million, which was about 1.2 billion yen at the time.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a high risk at the end, high reward. But I mean, if personally, if I would actually compare it to bigger high budget movies such as Your Name, I still kind of prefer the animation of Akira. It looks way more flawless. There was more action. But yeah, no, it's impressive. It's impressive. But you were saying?
Yeah, it's the highest. It has the highest budget of every anime ever at that time.
Of its time, okay.
And it was kind of the breakthrough, as you said, for anime. Let's say in the Western world.
Yes.
Even let's be honest, even in Japan at that time, it was pretty underground. I mean,
probably
anime was like more. It began with being like more a kids kind of thing, and then it grew into like those kind of themes, cyberpunk and stuff, and it was underground.
Yes.
I mean, even today, you think Japan's like all about anime and stuff. Well, they have a lot of, let's say, they have those maid cafes and stuff, but it's mostly tourists go to it, and
but it's not like,
let's not.
It's not
like you think
the
that
main
people,
culture.
Like 50% of all Japanese watch anime. No, it's a lot lower.
Yeah.
Than that. It's still
from the view
an
of the
underground culture.
international,
Let's be honest.
it seems like everybody's just on the anime train, even though it probably
Correct.
isn't. But it's,
Nowadays, especially in the Western world, anime is being appreciated.
I mean, I would say, okay, name. I would have probably said like more people in the West celebrate anime more than in Japan, but that probably is because there are more people in the West than in Japan. But
Talking statistics, yeah.
common statistics, let's go. But yeah, no, like Akira in that line served as a pioneer. I saw this one video of like this movie reviewer. He reviewed Akira, and he was talking about like seeing it as a child, and he's talking about like, yeah, well, in the West you only had like animation such as like, you know, Bugs Bunny, and you know, what was it, what was the mouse in the Disney shows
And you
called?
had Cinderella and those kind of stories.
You had Disney
Looney
movies, right?
Tunes,
You had Looney Tunes, Disney, like these like overly
Mickey
cartoony
Mouse. Well,
stuff.
Mickey Mouse, I guess it was a bit earlier than that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. You had like these cartoony things for kids, right? Where they were just like, I don't know, it was like a 10-minute, 15-minute, just like people just punching
Animation
each
was
other in
mostly for
cartoon.
kids in the Western world.
Exactly. But Akira, like for him at the very least, like brought in like animation, but like a serious theme to it, right? Like you saw people just being shot, like you saw blood everywhere. I'm still wondering how parents kind of allowed it, but there were wild times before. But yeah, so it's like anime, like through anime and stuff like that, like directors, movie tellers, brought in like heavier themes, more serious things to life. And that's why like anime kind of got prioritized, or I don't know, it just gained popularity versus like, I don't know, who celebrates, who watches Looney Tunes anymore, right? Like nobody. That's the answer. And yeah, that's what Akira did, and I mean, it's definitely getting its recognition, right? Like people do give it its respect, but yeah, I mean that's
Another
basically
thing
what
I
it is.
wanted to add is back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially in the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, people have had like this futuristic view of the world, like, you know, floating cars and
Oh yeah,
wealth, and let's say us, the humanity being united, and you know, being able to cure a lot of diseases, like almost everything, you know, this kind of utopia.
exactly. I was about to say
And it was pretty uncommon back in the day to
to
kind of
imagine it.
present this dystopia, this cyberpunk scene, you know, the world where there's like a lot of poor people doing you know, having no job or living like
Just
a very harsh life.
yeah,
And then
the
there's these multi-billionaire people who bomb and who kind of have these multi-billion military organizations that
yes.
nuke everybody.
So a
It's
negative,
kind of
like a negative perspective on the future, right? Like the possibility of it just being worse than the present in general was an
back in the
uncommon
day
one.
was pretty uncommon because there was a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Especially in the 80s, people
No,
were
especially
like,
in the 80s,
oh,
yeah.
you know, the year 2019, which is also the year which is displayed
In Akira.
where the plot is displayed in
Yeah.
in I was going to say cyberpunk, I mean Akira.
Yeah. I know,
And
you're giving it the Japanese pronunciation, huh? Akira. But yeah.
yeah, well, I watch it in Japanese, obviously. You too, I guess.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to watch anime.
You're right. You're right. You're right. I can't fault you on that. But yeah, it's taking place in 2019, right? And people have this like really futuristic not I mean obviously futuristic perspective, but this like overly positive, yeah, we're just going to come together and there aren't going to be problems, everybody's going to live together. And Akira just presented this like, oh yeah, no, maybe that's not gonna happen. Maybe it's just gonna be like really rich people, really poor people, technology, cybernetics, division,
And it also
inhumane
had a
things.
pretty uncommon plot development and character, let's say, setting,
Yeah,
which
you're
we'll get to
gonna
when we read the plot.
exactly, but you're gonna have to really explain to me like what the plot really was, because because that's some, I don't know. It's I yeah, I don't know. We're probably gonna get to that when we read it, right? But yeah, like these themes were relatively new for Akira. Damn. No, I'll just call it Akira, whatever. No, they were pretty new for the whole movie. It was a frontliner, and the animation was just top class, right? Like it was. What did you think? Did you get disturbed by it? Did you
I
think
was
at a whole?
impressed.
You were impressed. Okay, what
I was
about
just
like
impressed
compared to
because
like today's standards, right? Because you watch a lot of anime, so it's
yeah,
just like series and
and you know,
fighting
I would
scenes
have
and
never
stuff.
guessed, except for maybe the art style. I would have never guessed that it was made back in 1988.
1988, right?
Hmm.
It has like this a
At
bit
least that's
like
when it
older.
aired.
Yeah, it has like this a bit older feel to it because it's a bit darker, and you kind of notice that
Especially
it's
the
a bit
art
older.
style. I mean, the art style, you can see that it's kind of like they did it back in those days.
That too. But what impressed me was like if you watched it, yeah, I mean like since it was Japanese, I mean I watched it in Japanese as well and everything else like through that you would notice that it is anime, that it's coming from Japan, whatever. But like if you look at the character designs, if you look at I don't know, the I mean the even the action scenes and stuff like that, you wouldn't like it wouldn't be easy to say like this is actually like what anime is today, right? Because anime today kind of has like this kind of very similar character design, if you know what I mean. Like between like all shows actually, like everybody having like this really sharp nose or hairs just being like triangles, like you know what I mean? Akira doesn't really have that. It's more fluid, it's more human like in a lot of ways. And that's what made it more like, oh damn, this is more realistic than everything else. You know what I mean?
And I have to say, even the synchronization, which was the first time that an
Yeah.
anime had this type of synchronization, like they did it, like we did it usually in the Western world, where you had let's say the voice actor,
Mm-hmm.
and it's lip synced, and you know he lip syncs, like you know he talks, and the animation is made after that. Usually, anime were made
Oh no
that
way.
you had you had like the animation already, like with the syllables talking, you know, and the actor had to
So
kind of
that was the
fit
mechanic of
that
like
style, fit that pattern. But
okay.
this time it was made the other way around, like they do it with normal animation movies, Hollywood and
So wait, hold up.
Western
Wait.
animation
I
movies.
didn't even know that. Wait, so let me understand. Wait. The mouth movements of like the animation characters were modeled by
Were
the
modeled
voice
by the
actors.
voice actor.
And I mean,
Exactly.
you hear
So the
that a
voice
lot
actor
today.
said something, and then it was remodeled into the anime.
But that was Akira the first movie to do that?
It was
When-
the first It was the first animation, like the first anime
to ever do that.
to ever do that.
Amazing. I actually really didn't know that. I
That's
really
why
didn't know that.
it had like that fluent lip synchronization,
Yeah.
which was pretty impressive, because usually you have like those anime where even today where there's just like where the characters only speak in syllables, like Naruto, for example.
Exactly. They speak only in syllables, and sometimes it's just like it's just you open your mouth and whatever. So
A
they
sound comes out.
exactly, they really attempted to make it realistic as as realistic as possible, and I would actually say they succeeded in that hindsight. But no, that's amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff. Do you have anything else to add? Like any other information, any other surprises that I didn't know?
No, I'm actually done with that.
You're mostly done with that. So let's move on to like all the technicalities, all the mechanics of it were perfect. We can agree there. The story, as I said before, is still something that I don't understand. Like I don't know the plot. I don't know what it was all about. I don't know the message. I don't know the meaning of it. I don't even know what
Okay,
the
maybe
challenge was.
we should begin with reading the plot, I guess.
Let's start with reading the plot.
Let's
Should
read
I
the plot.
the plot?
like they say in New York City.
Should I read it, or do you want to? I got the really long version one.
You're Mr. I read it.
You read it?
No, you're Mr. I read it. So
Oh,
read it.
okay, my bad. So, okay, it goes like this, right? In 1988, a singularity destroys Tokyo. So wait, the story actually starts by in the time the movie was released, like in the fictional world, right? I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that. So okay, in 1988, a singularity destroys Tokyo. By 2019, Tokyo is rebuilt, now known as Neo Tokyo, but is plagued by corruption, anti-government protests, terrorism, and gang violence, and is on the verge of collapse. During the large protests in the hot-headed Shotaro, Kanada leads his vigilante Bozo Soku gang against a rival clown gang. Kanada best friend Tetsuo Shima individually crashes his motorcycle into Takashi, an esper who escaped from the government laboratory with the aid of resistance organization. The accident awakens psychic powers in Tetsu, attacking the attention of the secret government and project directed by Japan's self-defense forces. Colonel Shikishima, assisted by the Esper Masuru Shikishima, recaptures Takashi, takes Tetsu with him, and arrests Kanada and his gang. While being interrogated by the police, Kanada meets Kei, an activist belonging to the resistance movement, and tricks the authorities into releasing her and his gang. So that's the start of the story, right? So we can already start with like asking a question because I got more witness. Since you say since you say you understood it, I'm gonna put that on the test, right? So okay, so the story starts with an explosion happening in the movie. I take it, and the plot here says it's Tokyo that is exploding, right? Does it say
we could call it, it's like an apocalyptic event.
But what? Okay, so what's the reason that bomb explodes in Tokyo in 1988? So what?
Yeah, that's
what
a
happened?
good question. I mean, that's like that's what Akira is actually about. You know, you'll find it out. Like
that's the end of story, right? So yeah, so in 1988, this singularity, as they call it, destroys Tokyo, and it gets rebuilt, and the story takes place in Neo Tokyo, in 2019, right? And what basically happens is like we catch up to this one guy who's wounded. I mean, okay, so next to the fact that the bike gang war between the clown ones and Canada and his gang, whatever, the main story gets moved by this one guy who's bleeding, running away with like this one kid who just looks like a zombie, actually. Kind of looks like a zombie, right? And
I thought it was an alien at first, to be honest. I was like, that's an extraterrestrial for real.
That could have been.
Things gonna get like, you know, science fiction-y, like to the
in that hindsight,
to the fullest.
I don't know. I just thought it was like I didn't really give him much thought, but it was very much like said or portrayed that this kid was escaping from police, the government, or the military, whatever, right? So the military was after this kid, and we catch up to the kid called Kakashi being caught, right, by the government, whatever. And in between, this bike gang member called Tetsu exactly, came in an accident, got hurt, my bad, and got taken in by the military as well, right? And that's basically my first question, right? So like the story moves on with Kakashi being taken in, but just living in peace with the military afterwards, right? Like at first I thought, okay, so they were after Kakashi, so they must want him for this reason, for this certain reason that he has. They want to hurt him, they want to kill him, whatever. But that doesn't really happen. They just, he goes back, he finds two other kids that have the same like symptoms and they look exactly like him. And what was he really escaping from was like my first question. Like, do you have the answer to that?
I mean, they got the guy they shot. That was kind of
A
let's
resistance
say
member.
kidnapping him. Let's call it kidnapping at this point because that's what they said from the government perspective.
Yeah, but he
Um,
wasn't
it,
though.
it was one of those anti-government terrorists.
Exactly. But he wasn't kidnapping him, right? Because if you remember the scene,
He
like
kind of he kind of wanted to escape, to be honest.
that's what I mean.
Uh,
That's what, like, when what the guy was wounded, whatever, and he gets caught in the middle of the street basically, and the police just rile up on him, right? They just shoot him to, like, whatever, to bits, right? And then in his last I don't
mhm.
know, voice, whatever, he tells the kid, yeah, find this and this guy, run away, he'll help you. That doesn't seem like the kid was like involuntarily taken away. Like, it seems
Let's
like
just
the
say
guy
those
was helping the kid out.
zombie looking like kids, they kind of they're called espers in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they all have those kind of psychic powers,
Abilities, yeah.
psychic abilities, because they were experimented on by the government.
Yes.
Yeah, by the government, I guess, and also kind of by the terrorists. Well, I think it was the government in the first place who experimented.
No, it was
And
definitely the government that experimented on them. So basically,
they kind
well,
of took
four
those. I
kids.
think that they're like 4 kids, and they gave them like pretty strong medicine and drugs to kind of develop their psychic abilities and
Exactly.
treatments and whatever, which kind of made them not grow and stay. They don't age, at least not
Physically, they
not
don't
in
age.
height and mentally.
Yep.
They
So
just age kind of. You just see it from let's say their skin and
their
their hair,
face.
that and their face. And they also have like physical disabilities, like the girl who can't move and is kind of being kept alive in her bed. She's also the one that kind of had this vision of
What was to come?
what was to come.
What was to come? Yeah. So my question was, right. So okay. I mean, obviously, for the further questions
What the
to be
question
asked
was,
was
why
like,
did they escape? Why? I mean, why did
why did Kakashi want to escape? What was the whole purpose of it? Because, right, for the whole point of the
I
story, we
guess
can
the fact
summarize
that
it.
he was mistreated, maybe he just, it's obvious that being under this constant medication and is kind of stressing for you and for your body, and maybe he wanted to he's kind of being held captive. I mean, maybe he gets
That
what he
is,
wants and he's
I,
like,
the
but he's
relationship
still
between
kind of a
the
captive, and maybe he wants to discover what it's like outside in the, let's say, real world,
that
which
makes sense.
is kind of a dystopia in that in the series.
I would have, look,
And
I
I
would
mean, you
have, I
see
would
it.
have
There's like,
100% agreed.
there's like this bright aspect, the lights and everything's shiny, and they have like cool bikes. But in the end, it's actually, if you look at it, everything's kind of worn down. Um,
Yeah, it's lifeless
People
actually.
are pretty desperate, and
And
there are a
it
lot
was
of. I
overall
mean, there
really
was also a
confusing.
scene where there were a few homeless people, which you would say like, yeah, that's correct. It's like it's normal for dystopia. Um, but at the time in 1988, nobody would have thought that in 2019 there would still be homeless people in Tokyo. I mean,
Yes,
even
and
nowadays there are not that many.
in the
Um,
Western at least, right? So here, let me summarize the whole story, at least in my perspective, right? Because for me to ask the questions, like an awareness of like what the whole movement, what the whole intention should be clarified, right? So there's this thing, or okay, it starts out with like there's this thing called Akira. It's supposed to be portrayed like as the power of God, whatever, right? And this whole cult that prays for him, worships him, whatever, and they're protesting like on the streets, right? And the government is attempting to use these three kids that have, okay, like that look like kids, deformed kids. Let's say that De- three def- three deformed kids. It's politically correct, scientifically correct. I'm the government using these three kids in some ways to figure out when Akira is gonna, I don't know, awaken again, come again, or to how to acquire it, whatever, right? So all we know is the government wants Akira, or at least that's what I got, right? The government wants Akira. These three kids were supposed to help him, and one of them escaped. And along with his escape, for some reason, there was like a whole lot of protests, like turmoil, religious movements, and tax fighting, whatever, right? Like there was a lot of unrest in that time. And what happens is basically Tetsuo just kind of gets caught in the crossfire while fighting this clown gang. He kind of crashes into Takashi, right? Takashi, I don't know. Takashi. And with that, he kind of awakens his powers, whatever. He goes amok. He gets captured by the military.
You mean Tetsuo?
Tetsuo. Tetsuo gets captured by the military. They experiment on him a little bit more. He awakens. He recognizes his powers, whatever, and he goes full amok for the whole movie. Like he just starts
Correct.
wilding out. He goes out, starts killing people, just out of the left. He even killed one of his friends, right? Like former friends. That's right? That's confirmed. He killed one of his former friends. Kanada comes for him. He tries to kill him multiple times too. And they basically so yeah, Tetsuo starts killing people and then learns about Akira, what Akira is, and he was basically told, and literally just stop me and correct me whenever I'm wrong, right? So Tetsuo gets told about Akira, and how Akira is something that is better than him and that is more powerful than him, right? And he wants to challenge, he wants to find Akira, defeat him or whatever it is, and through that, he starts killing people, goes out, and finds the location, and basically finds the secret that Akira is actually another kid that was experimented on, but his limbs were just taken apart, right? He just finds separate organs of Akira, and and then and then and then he keeps fighting, and then for some reason the glasses of the organs break apart. Akira comes back to life, and another bomb explodes, like this ginormous one. Tetsuo kind of dies through that, and there was like this whole like psychic dream for Takashi, no, sorry, not Kakashi, Canada, and he escapes, and that was the end of the movie. Like that's how I saw it. Like I just saw things happening for no reason, for some reason. Do you know what I mean? Like it was very confusing for me. But
Yeah,
that's
it was confusing for me as well. Then
but you claimed no, you
then
can't
I
back
kind
out of
of
this.
tried to understand and comprehend what was happening.
Okay, so tell me what was
Um,
happening.
I mean, I started with the relationship of the two protagonists, which are Kaneda and
Yes.
Tetsuo.
Yes.
They're kind of in this biker gang, which is kind of a vigilante.
I mean, Tetsuo starts
gang.
as a protagonist, but he definitely becomes the antagonist later on, right?
Correct.
We would agree.
In the beginning, he's let's say he's kind of the second in command.
Yes.
In his biker gang.
Yes.
Let's just say that he's kind of a violent guy. My first impression was he's kind of the violent guy, the
Or
Mr.
overly
I'm
emotional,
always
right?
second.
Overly
Mr.
emotional.
I'm always second, and Kaneda is a lot better than me. Kaneda is kind of I mean,
leader.
they're all violent. Let's be honest, they're all a biker gang that
They're
does
a
illegal
gang,
stuff. But it's kind of obvious for that time. I mean, there were like in this dystopia,
Yeah.
in this cyberpunk, in this kind of setting where there's violence on the street. I mean, you saw the scene where they shoot the dogs, like in the middle of the street with
Yeah, that was
the car
ruthless.
standing because of a red light.
In the guy's
And
defense, I
you
mean,
know,
I would have shot the
overall
person.
there's a lot of street violence
I mean, in
and
the
gang
guy's defense,
violence.
I would have shot the dogs too. I mean, if it came to your life, like, but yeah. And no, I mean, you wouldn't shoot a dog or two if it came for your life. Of course you would, right?
Yeah, everybody would, I guess.
Now fuck dogs,
Um,
man. But yeah, yeah, that was a lot
and
of
as you
violence.
saw, I mean, they all go to school.
Yes.
And as you can see, that school was kind of worn out, destroyed, deserted. It was
Yeah.
all a mess, which kind of shows, like, if you're one of those, let's say, low ranked, there's like there's like a hierarchy, a hierarchical society where the billionaires, the people that kind of the government are on top, and then there's like this low class, which it, of which the two protagonists are a part of, and
Yes.
the whole gangs and stuff, and they're kind of fighting each other the whole time.
That
Um,
makes sense, but even though you're right,
Now,
right? I hear it a
connected
lot
to the
too.
story,
Yeah,
connected to the story. There's Kaneda, which he's kind of like the shining guy in the shining guy in the gang. He's like the hope of the gang, the leader, and he's kind of the boss, even he's kind of the responsible guy. And then there's Tetsuo, who wants to be like him, who's envious of him, who's jealous.
Yeah.
That Kaneda always gets the girls and does everything he does.
He's living in his shadow.
He does it
for
way
sure.
better than Tetsuo.
Yeah, Tetsuo basically lives in Kaneda's shadow. Would you say that?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
and he kind of gets aggressive because of that. He always tends to extremes. Like when he wants to be like Kaneda, especially like with the bike. He like takes his bike with his girlfriend, and what happens is another biker gang kind of
Catches
follows him, and then he almost gets killed.
And he gets saved
But
by
then
Kaneda.
his Kaneda and his friends save him, and then
Yep.
he's like really aggressive, almost killing this one guy of the enemy gang.
Yeah.
Which shows that he's kind of aggressive, and maybe he also acts like a child. He's like a grown kid, and it's actually I would say he's a dick overall.
Yeah.
He's a piece of crap as a person. And I kind of really didn't like him. He kind of has this craziness aspect of him, like he's like a psychopath, and it worsens throughout the story, especially when he kind of realizes he got the power. And
He got the power to do whatever he wants, right?
And it kind of, the story kind of shows what power can do when it's in the wrong hands.
Yes.
And
Or the
in this
feeling
case,
of powerlessness.
Tetsuo's hands, and what happened was he made everything more chaotic. He destroyed everything he got his hands on.
Yeah.
Even he tried
Even his friends.
he tried to destroy even his friend Kaneda, who used to be his friend,
His best friend, like they grew up together,
his
right?
best friend, of course. But it kind of shows that he's really bad inside. He has this anger, this envy.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. He tries to fight him till the last moment, and
Yeah.
tries to beat him, and he's always in competition with him. Exactly. That's at least all about the two protagonists. One's like the shining light of hope,
And the
in
other one's
exaggerated terms, and the other guy's the bad guy.
the antagonist.
the guy that turns bad. The Lucifer of the story.
Exactly. But okay, so my question basically was, right? What was okay? So let's start with like Tetsuo, right? Like what I liked about him. Even though you said you didn't like him, I pitied him for some reason, right? I think he was there's this whole feeling of like you're just in the shadow of this character, and even though that person doesn't mean it, but like the whole situation just kind of, you just become the butt of the joke, right? Like, and Tetsuo kind of felt like that, and he felt powerless, and his mission for some reason, not for some reason, but for accurate reason, was like when he got power was to make Kaneda just feel powerless, right? There was this whole scene at the end where like, well, you can't do anything against me. See what it feels like to be powerless, and you can't do anything against me. We're like, okay, damn, like he just played it in other ways. But what I basically didn't understand from Tetsuo's perspective was like Kaneda never set out to be like against him, right? It was he. I don't know. He was still a weird character that, in some ways, was understandable, but he was unreasonable at the end of the day. But what I didn't understand is like the whole relation with Akira, right? Akira is this one character that was experimented on, that had more powers than anybody else, and that like I think was the reason for like Tokyo's explosion as well, for in the first time in 1988.
Correct. He was the reason for the explosion, and which is what we discover later on when he kind of reawakens, and he does the same thing again. In the end, that's what happens.
The thing is like, why though, and how, and what was the reason? I still didn't understand it, right? Like I think that was really my problem. Like,
there's this speech. There's this speech that what's her name? Kaneda's almost girlfriend.
Kai. Yeah.
When they're like not in prison, but like in this kind of cell, and she starts talking and is like, yeah, well, I know about these so-called espers, and she kind of starts, because she's one of those terrorists or anti-government people.
Yeah.
At least she used to be. And she kind of knew about, the government's intel and deep secrets.
Yeah.
And she starts saying things like, everything's connected. It's
energy.
Everything, these psychic people just use the energy that has always been there. She kind of makes a lot of examples, like how we were primates, and there's always this process of evolution, and that energy is kind of eternal and limitless.
Yeah.
In the universe, and these so-called psychics have the ability to kind of use this energy that's always there. I mean, it's like,
it's never gone.
Energy cannot be created and cannot
destroyed.
go
cannot be
destroyed. Like that's one of those the physical principles. Principles of
physics.
You know what I mean? Science.
Science. Let's go. Yeah, that works.
And
yeah, they basically use it. She gave
that's what she
background
said.
Information. But what made Akira special? What was
he was, and human beings then wanted to use this so-called
energy.
Power that was everywhere in the air, that a lot of humans could generate. And that's kind of the whole story behind it. I mean, these psychics kind of have the access to this energy that is generated by a lot of other people and that is in the air. And what Akira basically is like, as a simple human being, you have like a total amount of energy to your use, to your at your disposition, which does not permit you to do these so-called paranormal things like the psychics do. And they have this access to because everything's, she says everything's connected. The universe is kind of, a thing of connections and so on. And Akira, he's kind of the embodiment of all this energy gathered at one point, artificially, because that's what happens, and it's kind of destructive. It shows that this kind of research leads to this massive destruction, and back in the day in 1988, the Cold War and so on was almost over, or let's say it was kind of at its peak in 1988.
Yeah, it had like
And people were
2 more
afraid
years
of the
left.
nukes. People were kind of afraid of the
Exactly.
nukes.
Literally, when you said
And
like,
I think it kind of, as you said, it kind of has something to do with its, Akira's kind of the, let's say, fictional version of a nuke.
and that's the point. Literally, while you were saying that, I didn't even think about it. I swear to God. You said something about like, you said the energy part, right? And what did you say again? You said like energy cannot be created or destroyed, but they worked on it for some reason. And what something you said like triggered like a nuclear for me, and that actually makes a whole lot of sense that it's a representation of like nukes and whatever, right? Because I don't know if you look at the whole backstory of like how nuclear science or whatever was implemented or created, was like to basically harvest a lot of energy, right? It was to destroy radioactive atoms and therefore like harvest a lot of energy to just, I don't know, to mobilize everything else, whatever. And through that, we weaponized it and created atom bombs, and the US dropped two on Japan, maybe even symbolizing the two explosions in Akira, right? Like the two atom bombs, who knows? Um, but the whole similarity actually makes sense. And I Googled it, and it definitely has to be something because there are multiple articles talking about the similarities between nuclear or the history, whatever, nuclear history and the whole movie. So, yeah, that was, I don't know, that was an enlightening information that I got right now. But yeah, it's, so there
Yeah,
has
so
to be
that's what
like,
it's actually about, in my opinion. And then of course there's like Tetsuo, which kind of shows what this energy can do in the wrong hands, because he's kind of an irresponsible, egotistic piece of crap.
why are you hating on my
Let's
man
be honest.
Tetsuo, man?
And you could say he's kind of, people could argue that this toxic city called New Tokyo, he's kind of, it created him,
Yeah,
he's kind of a child of this nature, of this
the whole society.
environment.
Yeah, of his environment. Yeah,
Of this sick society, this class society where full of corrupt politicians. I mean, you saw the there's also this corrupt politicians aspect. The guy, what's his name?
Was it the was he a politician
that gets a heart attack in the end?
Yeah,
and dies?
I didn't understand him at all. Like he just came out of nowhere, where he just he killed his coworkers and ran out with like money bills, whatever, and he swallowed some pills and died of a heart attack, right?
Yeah, it just shows how corrupt the politics were.
Yeah.
In that situation.
And he died. What about the whole bigger government thing? What did you think of that? Like the whole relationship with the general, how he disobeyed the main government, and they wanted to like. I didn't really understand it at the beginning because like the whole concept of like atom bomb it's not something that came to my mind. It makes a bit more sense now. It still raises
nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons.
I think it was the first thing I thought of when I saw the explosion.
Okay.
But then again, it kind of this idea kind of faded away again. But then in the end, I think this kind of came up to me again.
No, the storytelling could have been a bit I don't know. I wouldn't say a bit better because overall the whole anime is still legendary. Like I don't want to touch a few pieces and say like, oh, he messed up here. He should have been better. Because who the fuck am I to judge him by that? The director, by the way, which we have not mentioned. What's the name of the director? Katsuhiro Otomo? Is that right? Did I pronounce his name right? Anyway, you really gotta give him props for that.
Definitely.
I guess the whole concept of like atom bombs probably hits Japanese people way more than anybody else internationally for very obvious reasons, right? they suffered the most through them. I
Of
mean,
course.
even like 2011's accident. What was it called again? The
What, Hiroshima? No, I
Hirosh
mean,
no
not Hiroshima. Fukushima.
Fukushima. I don't know, but
Fuku, I
that whole
guess.
thing with like the tsunami hitting them and that again happening, whatever, like the whole radiation and science or whatever, how it has. I mean, but that's the next question that I actually wanted to ask. Like, would you say the whole synopsis of it, like, if the whole crisis of atom bombs is something that was caused by failure in science, by greedy people, or
Um,
who's really at fault there, right? That's the main question.
Kind of by the whole environment, this group of, groups of people who have this desire for power in
Okay.
general, like, the both the government and the anti-government organizations, the terrorists, they all want power.
Yeah.
um and in some way, they even go so
As far
they even go to
to
that
the
level where
extent.
they kind of abuse children with drugs, and just to get like these psychic powers out of them.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sickening story. And the whole world, like, I mean, the whole, like, Neo Tokyo, how it's all how do you say, everything's worn out.
Yeah.
In Italian we say degrado.
What does that mean?
Everything's degraded.
Okay, degraded. But
It's
no,
pretty
the
shitty.
it
Like,
really is. And
the school, and people are poor. People, they eat shit. They're shooting. They're violent
yeah, the city looks
because of their
lifeless.
economic situation. As for example, people become gang members because they have no real future.
Activities. Yeah, it's.
At least children.
I mean, you seen it, like you said, like through the school. It was like it didn't really mean anything, right? Like there was no like, oh yeah, okay, I can study and become something. There was no feeling of like there is hopes and dreams in here. It's like any hopes and dreams die out in Neo Tokyo. But my question was once again like who's really at fault there, right? And you said like the environment, but I was more of
I
asking
would
you like,
say, if I would point fingers, I would point them at the corrupt politicians and those military organizations
but how
who are like those billion-dollar companies that exploit, that are like really greedy for power.
true, but
And actually, that's what it's about. The common people being kind of the victims. Tetsuo being, let's say, he's kind of the symbol. He kind of he represents all those victims that this society has made. At least
true,
that's
and
my
the
opinion.
internal anger in some ways, right?
Exactly, and that's why in the end it kind of all comes up to this nuclear explosion, which kind of is all the energy from all the people, and the rage. It's
Kind
kind
of
of the embodiment of that.
destroying the whole and killing everybody with it, right? Everybody's energy, everybody's anger.
Kind of, it's kind of
Kill-
cleansing.
Exactly, and it kills everybody, and nobody wins at the end, right? The whole city's destroyed. A few may escape, but most people are dead.
Kaneda escaped, right?
Yeah, he did with Kai and the remain of his friend.
Exactly, and he's let's say he's always been like the strong guy, the leader. The, as I said, the shining hope of light.
Yeah. Wait, what happened?
The shining knight in armor, and there's always got to be this good guy in a story, even though he grows up in a shitty environment. He's still
Yeah, you see the contrast between Tetsuo and
he still has morals and ethics.
Yeah.
And a code.
Yeah, but wait. So did Tetsuo die? And what about the?
I guess he definitely died. When he mutated and he became he kind of screamed Kaneda's name because
for help.
He's kind of a child. He deep inside of him there's this child who kind of needs Kaneda's protection to be. He kind of, even though he hated it, there was a reason for him being in his shadow, because he wasn't a strong guy. He never stood up for himself.
Nah, he didn't grow up mentally at all. But what happened to the other espers then? After the explosion, I guess. Did they die
They
too?
probably
Is that
died. I would say
disclosed?
they died, surely.
And did Akira die with them as well?
I don't know. I mean, if he didn't die the first time,
I mean, he kind of
well,
did
maybe
die
he
at the
he
first
got
time.
like, yeah, he's probably dead as well, I would say. But he's kind of more like an idea, like, he's even worshipped like a god. He's kind of an idea, which means that he's probably not dead, because ideas never die. But Akira as a person, like as the individual in that moment, is probably dead.
I would have
Yeah.
probably, yeah, possibly. But so okay, how much fault would you actually give scientists in the whole story, right? Because like we said, like most stories, most animations, most fables, whatever, are um
Um,
reflections of
like,
reality,
you want a
right?
percentage?
I don't know any way you want to explain it. Whatever suits
I
you.
would say the scientists, as the scientists,
How much
as
of a
being
role does
scientists,
science play in the
searching for
destruction
meaning.
of
Being a
society?
scientist actually means searching for things. But the thing is, scientists often, because they have like this disconnection to reality, they don't live in this social world. They're like dedicated to one thing, and they ignore everything else. They're kind of pretty easy targets to manipulate. So I wouldn't say the scientists are his fault, but as people, they don't. I don't think they realize what kind of how menacing their creations can be. I mean, remember Einstein, and after they dropped, I mean,
The nukes.
the nuke on Japan. Not only Einstein, but even the pilot and all those people. They were like,
Yeah, what have we done?
they only realized what they did after they did it,
Yeah.
and they were pretty shocked, which is obviously correct, because
Yeah, that's the only
I still
reaction you
think
can
it's
only
one of
have.
the biggest tragedy in human history.
Exactly, but
But
so how much of like societal problems, whatever, at least that we're facing today, would you actually uh
the
point
problem is,
scientists
I believe
towards?
the problem is that science is way too power oriented, and it's misused in military, because um, let's be honest, these scientists, like even nowadays in this world, are manipulated by the economy, by rich people, by the
Politicians,
billion-dollar companies who give them, let's say they give them
donations,
donations, and let's say
sponsorships.
capital
Yeah.
at a disposal for them to use for
Yeah.
their research, and they get like the creations from them, and usually they're not used for the benefit of let's say society and the normal people, which is a shame. And yeah, I guess that's mostly what Akira is about.
That makes sense. I guess like the perspective that you can see from is I would have said I mean, I would have probably agreed with you like that today's scientists at the very least are I don't know, politically motivated. Um I mean just like sponsored by specific people that do have agendas and intentions, right? I 100% agree on the in that perspective, right? But I'm referencing I guess the nuclear war incident, I guess, after or during the Second World War, if you may. Um, I don't know how much of a blame I would put on Einstein. The fact that two bombs were, um, uh, I guess, detonated in Japan or on Japan rather, because it exploded in the air. But what I'm trying to say is like, um, I guess scientists at the very least should have or were before working on really um asking questions, right? Like, okay, what can I do with this and how can I improve that? And it was basic form of like rationality and asking questions, whatever. And I mean, I would certainly hope it's still happening today, because without that you wouldn't have innovations. But that's the key word, right? Innovations and progress. Like without asking questions, you can't have an answer, and you can only see if the answer is negative or not after you get the answer, right? You can't just say like, well, what can like if you imagine like before we invented electricity, people were saying like, oh, what do you need that for? Like we don't know, like, right? Like people only knew what to do with electricity once they had it, and they built cars with it, they built whatever. Like we had steam engines before that. What I'm saying is like catastrophes do come, but I don't think the science that led to catastrophes is like really destruction oriented, or at the very least that's only half of the truth, right? And the other half of the truth that I wanted to say is that most innovations actually come through the military, right? I think we can agree there. And we can also point out the fact that the whole thing with Akira and Tetsuo and everything in the movie was actually military oriented. It was the whole general that was leading the whole operations. He was putting a protocol on the whole experiments, the operations, whatever, right? It gives this whole connotation of like, yeah, we should weaponize these things, right? I think in some hindsight that's what kills science, trying to like weaponize achievements maybe. But without weaponizing things, or without having the intention of weaponizing things, we wouldn't have had as many innovations as we do right now, like planes for a certain and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's a
I believe
complicated
that
thing.
we have innovation where the money flows, and the money usually flows into military, and
Exactly. And
it's
I mean,
kind of, you know,
my bad.
it's a sad thing, and that's my critique on science. I believe it should be used for the people and not against, and to kill others and to conquer, and you know, just for the purpose of achieving power. And in this case, I believe it's very well displayed in this factor is very well displayed in Akira. And yeah, that's what I would say.
How would you
Did you have a
say?
favorite character?
I mean, I wouldn't say I really did. I probably most. I mean, like most people, I would say, Canada. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I agree with you on that one.
I don't think there's like any other character that was significant enough to really. I mean, you really only have like two. No, I mean, you could say like the general maybe, but you don't really know him deep enough to like judge him in that hindsight, right? But Tetsuo, Canada, the general, maybe Kai. I don't know.
I can just say Tetsu was a pain in the ass, in my opinion,
But he's
as
like,
as I
in
said
some ways,
countless times.
but like through him, you feel the anger that exists in the city, right? He was like a
Mm-hmm.
representation of like, okay, he's just a child of his environment, and you gotta give him props for like, I don't know, I guess resembling that, whatever. But how far do you think? How far do do you think we are today from like a society like Neo Tokyo? Let's say that. What would you say?
You mean this dystopia, like
Mm.
cyberpunk society?
This really like cyberpunk society
How
where
far
like,
we are? I mean, we in the West, I believe we're kind of heading to that type of society,
yeah,
especially because you know, the rich are getting richer and the poor
yep,
are kind of getting more poor.
yeah,
Um, and let's say science is not heading. Let's say it's still not researching for the people. It's still being weaponized. You know,
exactly.
drones and all those kind of things. And I believe from a 2021 perspective, I would say this kind of dystopia is a lot more or has a lot higher probability to be a reality one day than like this flying car and curing diseases utopia.
What I would say, you're right. I would probably agree with you. Um, I think science currently, as of today, at the very least, is kind of works more rather as a weapon or as a as a tool for, I don't know, the military or the government, rather than actually like a service to the population, whatever, right? It doesn't motivate like ordinary people to innovate things, right? Like as in before, it was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was literally regular people that were interested in like a certain topic, that researched it, went, I don't know, kilometers away to find like a certain book, read it, think for years about it, and bring this revolutionary thing, right? Whether like instead, like now it's like you gotta go to uni to become, I don't know, a pharmacist, but researching is not something you're able to do actually. And for instance, like I wanted to bring this fact up, like the US, we can always use the US as reference, but the US has approximately of like 720.5 billion dollars budget yearly for their military, right? um which is just, it's so much, it's really much. Like you got, like mentally, like I read somewhere like people can't even imagine like what a million is. Like you can't, you really can't imagine. It's just like a mysterious number for you, but you can't even imagine what almost like $1 trillion means, right? And that yearly for the military alone. Imagine that amount of money, at least half of it was actually spent on like medicine research and stuff like that, right? And I saw some, like a video, like I think yesterday or 2 days ago, where someone was saying, do you actually still believe that chemotherapy, for instance, is actually still the best possible treat? I don't know. Was it you? I don't know. Did I see it
I
from
believe it
someone
was
else?
me.
I think it was
I
you.
think I said that.
I think it
You know,
was
I
actually you.
have kind of my,
Imagine me
I
referencing you
I kind of
to
have my
you.
doubts on modern medicine and all those innovations that kind of create even more sick people. To
That's
be
what I mean.
honest,
But that's what I mean, right? Like
um,
I don't, I after you said it, like I have to think about it a bit more. Like yeah, like I don't think chemotherapy is like theoretically the best treatment you can give. And I would imagine throughout the years that chemotherapy was being like used and has been known for whatever, that the government could have probably researched a far better treatment by now, but they haven't, for possibly financial reasons, right? Like if you have cancer, you go there, you spend a lot of money only to have like a slight amount of chance to maybe survive or not. And this whole collusion of like medicine, science, like medicines and biology is obviously only one aspect of science, right? But I think it clearly represents a the status quo of the relationship between government and science. I think there's a lot of collusion happening, and it's definitely not productive at all, right? Like I think we'd agree there. It's
definitely.
Yeah, we're definitely heading into like very negative territories for the future. I don't see anything happening, but like the whole cyberpunk aesthetic, I think we're already heading there. We're obviously like already operating as cyborgs if you think about it. Um I mean, we don't have like cybernetic enhancements in our bodies, but look at our
At
phones,
least,
right?
well, not all of us. I mean, some
Okay,
have,
you're right.
some
Most of us,
do.
right? Like the heart thingy, right? And other things as well. But what I mean is like most people at the very least. I mean, we're already heading towards it, right? You've heard about this Neuralink or whatever from Elon Musk, where
Yeah, I've heard about it. This isn't it supposed to be like a microchip? Is it a microchip?
exactly, it's supposed to be like
Yeah.
implanted in your brain, and you're supposed to. Damn, it's actually really fascinating. You're supposed to be able to calculate a bit faster. It's supposed to help people that are disabled, so neurologically, and other few things. So like once it's really commercialized like that, we're already cyborgs. But I would have argued like no person goes outside of their house without their phones, for instance, right? um Computers are essential for work overall right now. We have technology left and right towards us, right? We're kind of already cyborgs. We're abandoning our, I guess human side in a lot of ways more rapidly than ever. And yeah, Akira is really not that far away. I guess the world. That's what I gotta say.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that thought process.
All right, so coming to the conclusion, how would you rate it? How and why? Yeah, you got to give a clear reason for it.
7.5.
How, okay,
I'm
why?
being harsh.
Okay, you're being harsh, and why?
Um, I have to say I'm reading. I'm obviously rating it from today's perspective. If it was back in 1988, I would have definitely gave it
Should have given it an 11, probably.
an 11.
Yeah.
But from nowadays perspective, I mean, I don't have a problem with the art style. I mean, I'm personally, let's say, I'm not a fan of too much
Too much what?
fan. Um,
What does that mean?
the fact that the women kind of look like men. It was kind of irritating at the
Wait, how is
at
it?
first.
Wait, I didn't even notice that.
I'm just toying with you.
All right, yeah, because like I
I'm just
genuinely
toying.
saw a clear difference.
That's not a main factor which would influence my rating.
Okay.
But still, I believe there was a lot of chaos. I mean, the action scenes were great, and
the action scenes were great. Yeah, they weren't long, right?
It's the 7.5 maybe for the message. Well, the animation's obviously a 10 out of 10 for that time.
Yes.
And even nowadays, it's still pretty good. Then, let's say the plot. I didn't like the plot that much, to be honest. It was a bit too chaotic. It was just anarchical. And the message was a bit dark, to be honest. It was displayed in a very
weird manner,
abstract, weird way, as you said.
Yes.
And therefore, I'd give like the plot is a 7, and the message is kind of like a 6.5 or something. It's average. So I would go for a 7.5 in overall. At least in my rating in my book.
Let me calculate it. You had a 10 out of 10 for animation plus 6.5 for message.
And 7. Well, overall it would be a bit higher. Maybe an 8, like if you calculate it.
So it says 7.8, yeah.
Now let's say it's a 7.5.
That's not a bad rating. That's really not a... Damn, my video glitching.
I mean, I didn't enjoy it by watching. I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed, for example, other movies like Kimi no Na wa, Paprika.
Yeah.
And which movie did I watch lately? Just forget. For example, like I said, Spirited Away. I brought the example beforehand.
But no,
those are kind of movies that at least had a stronger impact on me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I know, on my thought process.
That makes absolute sense. So an overall of 7.8. Are you satisfied by that?
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
It's still like in the higher category of anime.
It's not bad. I personally, I would have overall given it an 8. I probably have the same issues as you do with it. Starting with the negatives, I think the story wasn't clear for me. Although most stories aren't clear for me in the first place, but in the story, I would have given it a bit of lower ranking. The message, after I probably understood it, it's a really good message, right? It's it might have been like a science economy class division futuristic, along with like anti-war messages. It's very complex. I'll probably rewatch it again to see it or maybe understand it a bit better. But if it's as it seems for me, at the very least, the message is pretty good. It's probably higher up. I gave it a bit of a higher ranking than you did because of its context as well. Like it's, like how we discussed in the beginning, it's like one of the frontline runners for like anime, right? It was the first one to arrive in the West and have a huge acceptance rate, whatever. And for that, I really do give it a lot of props. Maybe I should push it to 8.5, but yeah, okay, let me give it an 8.5. I give it an 8.5. It's one of the better animes, but the story was a bit more confusing than I probably desired. Sounds right? 7.8. So our overall rating is 0.5.
8.1.
8.2.
8.2.
8.2. I mean, we could say 8.1. It doesn't matter. But an 8.2. I think I'm satisfied with that. It's a rewatchable movie. Actually, I would probably rewatch it a bit. Like, I don't know, maybe once a year, whatever, to just recatch it. Or I would probably get nostalgic at a certain point. So it's not bad. So that concludes everything, doesn't it?
That concludes everything.
So
I guess I'm gonna give the viewers the last words. Thank you very much for watching, and
yes, sir.
See you in the next episode
of another. See you. I kind of messed it up.
Paradox.
I messed it up once again. But yeah, see you guys. Cut. That's it.